Okay, good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may happen to be. I am Tad, I'm here. I'm here in California, and we're going to start a new book tonight. Not new in the sense of not previously published or anything like that. In fact, it's another one of my books. And I had put off reading it. This is The Dirty Streets of Heaven, which is one of the the first of the Bobby Dollar books. And I had put off reading it for a number of reasons, not least of which there's a lot of swearing and a lot of sex scenes. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and read it, and I may edit some of the sex scenes down slightly because of these going up on YouTube. I still don't know what the rules are, and I'm going to have to consult with Chris Fab and find out. But anyway, what a week! What a week it's been. Well, as you know from probably if you were here last week for the reading, we have adopted another dog. Her kennel name or her Humane Society name, anyway, where she was being kept after she had been found wandering around with some other dogs in a field, was Lemon Drop, they named her. And for now, we're still calling her Lemon. It's a little unusual because we normally, all of our dogs get what we would call people names. So we've had, all male dogs with names like Johnny, Oscar, Frank, Walter, our dear departed Walter, who we have just lost. But we also don't want to freak her out too much. Anyway, so, God, as I said, what a week. So we very quickly discovered that she was afraid of Johnny, not without some reason, because Johnny is not really very well attuned to welcoming a new dog into the house by being calm and gentle. So basically, we've had to keep them separated all week as we're trying to very slowly introduce them to each other and desensitize them and do all this stuff. But it's become like a full-time job because we don't want to leave her alone. We just got her out of the kennel, the whatever you want to call it. And but we don't want to leave Johnny all on his own either while we're attending to her, because then he'll feel like, oh great, this new dog comes and nobody cares about me anymore. Anyway, that's what we assume he'd feel. So Deb and I are in separate rooms, taking turns. One of us with the new dog, one of us with Johnny. In fact, I'm hoping she will stay asleep while I'm down here because she is on her own at the moment and she hasn't spent a lot of time on her own. She's an absolute sweetie, I have to say. Our Lemon, our new Lemon. She is, in that way anyway, the name does not fit because she is not at all a lemon. She's just a lovely, sweet-natured, very gentle, waggy, wants to climb on you and cuddle and be friends and all that stuff. And so we're going to just work on it and work on it and work on it until everything is calm. But it's taking longer than we had hoped. And so what a week. So yeah, so basically we've been having full-time dog sitting most of the week. And so what else is going on? When I can, I have snuck down to the office and done some writing. But there hasn't been a huge amount of it. And we haven't even had our oldest kid's birthday dinner yet because we can't leave the dogs on their own. And everybody who would normally house sit for us is somebody who would be going to our son's birthday dinner, namely our other kids. So it's just rippled out and rippled out. But on the other hand, I kind of pushed it to happen because we needed to do it for a number of reasons, and the longer we waited, the more complicated it would be. And Deb had already seen this dog and thought she was lovely and sweet and would be the perfect dog. And so I went, well, she's still at the shelter after a week. I guess, we should go ahead and do it. So we did, and which is not that we have forgotten about Walter or anything like that. It was just that Johnny's not used to being on his own. When he first came into the household, he was the fourth of four dogs, and then the last couple of years, year and a half, couple of years, he's been just alone with Walter, who was really failing and kind of freaky, I think, for Johnny to be around. So we just decided, we need another dog. We need another dog so that Johnny has a companion, so that, on those rare occasions when we actually leave the house, he's got somebody to hang out with, stuff like that. So anyway, that's what's going on with dogs. That's what's going on with the splintered son, which otherwise I'm pleased with. But of course, as always happens, when you feel like you have hit your stride on something and you're bubbling up with ideas and ready to write the next bit and all that, that's when life happens. As John Lennon once put it, when you've made other plans. Life is what happens when you've made other plans. I believe that was Lennon. So that's basically all I have to relate. I am going to read from The Dirty Streets of Heaven. We will, since we're going to be back to reading a novel, we'll be going pretty much till the top of the hour or a good stopping place. So that at least will be less confusing in some ways, time-wise, than the Martian Chronicles, where I was kind of trying to do just one story per sitting. So let me, as you can tell, I'm a little bit loopy because of lack of sleep and animal care and all kinds of stuff like that there. And yeah, I mean, Deb and I are shouting back and forth across the house. Anytime somebody goes out of one room and into another, or is opening a door or whatever, we're alerting each other so that the dogs don't suddenly have, some kind of a contretemps, which would cause problems and cause bad negative impressions, or it's bizarre. It's entertaining in a kind of a weird way. It's something I think we will look back on and laugh when we live through it. But for now, it's just pretty much exhausting. But it's something that we chose to do, so that is not a complaint. And as I said, she's just the sweetest dog, and I will, I'm sure, flood Facebook and other things with pictures of both of them, and especially the new one, who many people haven't seen yet, once we've got things calmed down a little bit. But as it is right at the moment, can't do much of anything except just hang out in our rooms, in our respective rooms. Me in one, Deb in another. Anyway, let me go and see who we've got here, who has checked in. And I see Sandra was the first. So hello, Sandra. Iris, hello, good to see you. Suzanne, a pleasure, and thank you for checking in from Yorkshire. Wouter, hello. Well, Wouter, of course, checking in from the Netherlands. Mark Redman also checking in from Yorkshire. And let me see. Nicole, hello. We have not, Nicole asks if we've settled on a name. I did mention briefly, we are still calling her Lemon. She is slightly lemon colored, and her eyes are very lemon colored. I kind of wanted to give her a human name, but we'll see how it feels. We'll work with whatever works. And there's my friend Ivan. Hello, Ivan. Good to see you. And Penny, hello. And Chris. Hello, Chris. I just name checked you a moment ago. And Christy Sanders, good morning, good morning. And my dear mother-in-law, Hazel, good morning, sweetie. Good to see you. Deborah has escaped the needy dog for tonight. She's in the bedroom tonight having a little restful sleep instead of having to share a bed with a very cuddly pit bull who climbs all over her. So anyway, she's fine. Hope you guys are all well there. We send our love. Who else is here? Petra. Hello, Petra. Good to see you. Chenoa. Good to see you too. Christina. Hello, hello. Good to see you, and I'm glad you're looking forward to Bobby Dollar. I enjoyed writing these books quite a bit, but I'll talk more about them as I read. Isaac, hello. Yes, all your pets have people names too. Yes, good. I like that. I've always liked that. I think there's nothing funnier than having, for some reason, it just amuses me to have like a dog named Steve. Yeah, it kills me. So anyway, but we'll see. She may stay as Lemon. Deb likes Lemon Drop, which is a bit too long and complicated for me. I wanted to call her Lucy, or maybe Lulu. But as I said, we'll see. She may pick her own name by what she likes best. Nikki, hello, hello. And checking in from Leicestershire. Oh, freezing cold, I'll bet. It actually is pretty miserable here today. It's just pouring rain and pretty much will all week. Winter, hello, good to see you. Susan Shamblin, hello, hello. Thanks for joining us. Jeremy, yes, the trauma indeed of introducing Johnny to a new roommate. Well, the problem is that Johnny doesn't. He was the youngest dog of the family of dogs when we first brought him in, when there were 3 others beside him. So he had kind of, even though he was by far the biggest, he had to do this kind of hierarchy thing. He's also a male dog, who I think may be even more hierarchical than female dogs. So he was, he just kind of had to slot in. And I've told you many times how little 4-pound Walter would like leap up and hang on Johnny's cheek, when Johnny got out of line and stuff like that. So Johnny doesn't really have a map for how to be an older brother. And as I keep warning Deb, I said, he will have to establish some dominance thing. Fortunately, Lemon's not small. See, Johnny's about 70 something pounds or more. She's about 50 pounds or so. So she's not tiny, and she's probably mostly pit bull. So, some kind of bull terrier. So she's not a skinny, wispy little dog. She's a chunky little muscular thing. Anyway, so that's what's going on with the new family member. And who else I want to check? Yeah. So Johnny, we can't rely on him to be one of those like super chill dogs. He's very excited. He may want to run up to her to establish some kind of dominance, or he may just want to run up to her because he knows she's here. He sees her. We take them out on walks together, well separated and stuff like that. So he knows she's here, and he's being kept from her. So I'm sure he's very curious. Anyway, so that's what's going on. So Ilva, hello, darling. Good to see you. Sorry we haven't had much chance to talk lately. Jennifer, hello. Nice to see you. Jennifer Rousseau. Yeah, okay, good. Sandra, good to see you too. And Jessica, hello, Jessica. This is Jessica Ashmore. Kristen, hi, Kristen. Andre, good to see you. Becky, checking in from Hamburg. And I think, settle for Steve, says Ivan. And Suzanne says Stevie. It's funny because actually Stevie Smith, who is a pretty well-known British poet of the 20th century, who had a poem called Not Waving Drowning, I think, or maybe it was the title of her poetry book. But anyway, she wrote a poem about a cat who was always galloping around doing good. And that's what we used to say about Walter, our little late Chihuahua, our skinny deer-like Chihuahua, who was always running around, taking care of things, keeping an eye on everything, back and forth, covering 100 yards for every few yards that people or other dogs would cover. So Stevie actually would be an appropriate name for her, except that I'm leaning toward, if we don't stick with Lemon, I'm leaning toward L names just because they work, because she's already used to being called Lemon and Lemon Drop, because that's what they called her at the shelter. Anyway, okay, so I think I've said hello to everybody. I hope I have, and a special hello to my mother-in-law, who it's always a pleasure to see. And it's probably cold where she is in the West Midlands as well. And if so, I hope you're staying warm, Hazel, sweetie. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading. Before I start, oh gosh, darn it, I don't want that. Before I start, I'm trying to remember if there's any stories about the genesis of the Bobby Dollar books. All I can really think of is that at some point way back when, because I think this book must have been published about, almost 20 years ago now. Is that possible? No, it's got to be later than that. But anyway, when I was before I started writing the Bobby Dollar books, I just had an errant thought, which was, if the whole sort of Christian theology, Judeo-Christian theology thing were true, which I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying if it were, in the mythological sense, that the whole story was, more or less as it has been given to its adherents, then the situation between heaven and hell would kind of be like the Cold War, except much longer. It would be this thing where it had just gone on and on and on and on, and both sides didn't want to cause an outright rupture because it's a very shaky piece upon which the health of the world depends. But they would also be constantly working against each other. And as I started to think about that and think about, it'd be interesting to write about an angel who's kind of like a lot of characters in noir novels, he kind of doesn't necessarily trust his own side all that much, in the kind of Raymond Chandler-esque, oh, I'm not of the system, I'm outside the system. So the more I thought about this, the more I thought, there's a lot of opportunities there for characters and situations and all this because, it's a classic thing, but it's got to be a noir. Just in my mind's eye, I was thinking, it's like, because at first I was thinking espionage. And then I went, but, espionage, I'm not into that as much. I mean, I like a John le Carré novel as much as anybody, but it's not really what I want to write. What I'd rather write it as a noir. I'd like to have the main character talking to the readers, in that kind of Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler style. But then I ran into a problem. And don't worry, I will start reading in a moment. I'm just going to explain this one thing. And then I ran into a problem, which is that, to my way of thinking, all good noir, all great noir anyway, is urban. It's essentially urban. And it's the locale that is a character also. Classically, I've mentioned Philip Marlowe, the character out of Raymond, I've just been saying it over and over again. But Philip Marlowe's purview is Los Angeles, the LA of the 1940s, really, 40s and late 30s, 40s, early 50s. And there's a cat on my desk now. And Dashiell Hammett, San Francisco, a lot of the noirs are very much urban things because they're about people sliding in between the cracks and maneuvering in the gray areas and all this stuff. And don't have to have, but the classics all take place in these big populated environments with a vast spectrum of kinds of people and situations. But the main problem was that, first of all, even though I live fairly close to San Francisco, as I said already, Dashiell Hammett and Sam Spade had pretty much made that their own. But also, I didn't feel like I knew it well enough. I used to be there quite a bit, but I've never lived in San Francisco. I stayed there, but I've never lived in the city. Equally so with LA, spent a lot of time there, never lived there. I didn't really feel like I could write a good noir about an urban setting that I didn't know well. So there I was in this situation. So what'll I do? I went, well, I'll invent one. So what I did was I invented a city, which you'll discover fairly quickly because I think it comes up maybe even tonight. But I invented a city that was basically in the same suburbs in which I grew up here in the San Francisco Bay Area. The area around Mountain View, Palo Alto, Redwood City, which won't mean much to you folks in Europe, except that it's Palo Alto is not only one of the sort of founding centers of Silicon Valley, but and the reason for that is because of Stanford University. There's a kind of Bay Area synergy around Stanford University, University of California at Berkeley, places like that, and San Francisco, which is one of the reasons that the 60s kind of took off here in a number of ways. story for another time. I talk about the history of the Bay Area. I've got lots to tell. But anyway, so I invented a city, and it's called San Judas. And why it's called that is also explained in the book. So, but it is also a character, and I had a wonderful time. It was one of the most entertaining times that I've had writing. Hey, cat, get the cat butt out of my face. Thank you. Goosh. Okay, anyway, so I'm going to start reading. So thank you for your patience, and we will now get started. This is The Dirty Streets of Heaven, the first of the Bobby Dollar books. And we are starting with, yeah, I know you're ticked at me. Go on, take a hike. PJ is irritated because I just pushed him off that, not pushed him off bed, I just urged him off the desk. Anyway, prologue, Inhuman Resources. I was just stepping out of the elevator on the 43rd floor of the 5-Page Mill building when the alarms began to go off. Those nightmarish clear the building kind, like the screams of tortured robots. And I realized I'd pretty well lost any chance at the subtle approach. Did I mention that when I'm under stress, I tend to revert to old habits? And being chased by monsters... Oh, and if I didn't say this already, there's a decent amount of swearing in this. I don't think any of you guys are under the age of 12. So, but I'm just, if you've got your kids sitting there and you don't want them to hear certain swear words, you take whatever action you deem necessary. Stuff gotten in their little shell-like ears. Did I mention that when I'm under stress, I tend to revert to old habits? And being chased by monsters, as well as being made the fall guy for the biggest fuck-up between heaven and hell in the last few thousand years, will produce some stress. So that was me right then, jumpy and in need of answers. And when I'm feeling that way, I tend to push on things until something happens. I didn't calm down any when a husky security guard lurched out of the stairwell a few yards away, eyes adrenaline wide, shoving his service pistol in my face. He shouted, "Get on the floor!" But instead of keeping the gun trained on me, he started waving it to show me where to go. And I knew that I had him. Hold on. Don't you want to see my employee badge or something? I was doing my best to sound like a confused and innocent corporate drone. Please don't shoot me. I want you down on the floor, there. Again, he jabbed the gun toward the discreetly expensive carpeting. The alarms were making it hard to hear, so I went with that, screwing up my face in fear and confusion. What? I didn't understand you. Don't shoot. God damn it, get down. He grabbed my arm with his free hand. I leaned away to get him off balance, then yanked his wrist so that he staggered toward me, waving his gun hand in a desperate attempt to keep his balance. It didn't matter much because I hit him square in the face with my forearm, jolting his head back and dropping him like a sack of laundry. Broke his nose, too, I'm pretty sure. I didn't know whether Vald's security guards were normal people on a normal payroll or soldiers of the opposition, and I didn't have time to search this guy for extra nipples or whatever. To be honest, except for a few retro covens, extra nipples have pretty much fallen out of fashion as a sign of allegiance to hell. So I left him alive, but unconscious on the floor, and tossed his gun and walkie-talkie into a trash bin in case he woke up sooner than I expected. Everything had gone ass up now, and I knew I would be better off just leaving before anyone got killed. But I do have that problem I mentioned. Like, when I get agitated, I just kind of put my head down and keep shoving. Like a rhino with an itch, as my old boss delicately put it. Anyway, I decided I might as well see where this whole thing was going to lead. I knew I had about 7 or 8 minutes maximum before the building was completely overrun by people with guns who would be happy to use them on me. So I hurried up the stairs to the 44th floor, where I paused for a second or two to admire the view of Stanford University's creepy Gothic towers through the picture window at the end of the hall. The master office suite clearly took up the entire floor, so I walked through the only door and found myself standing in front of the calmest woman I have ever pointed a gun at. She was good-looking, too, slender, with Eurasian features, short dark hair, and extremely cold eyes. I was pretty certain she'd already pushed the silent alarm. "Who are you?" she asked in the tone of a bored DMV clerk. She didn't even look down at the barrel of the .38, although it was only inches from her nose. "And what do you want?" "I'm here to see your boss," I explained. "Shall I just go in?" To her credit, she didn't bother to argue with me, or even threaten me, just came over the desk hissing and clawing like a methadrened ocelot, doing her best to tear off my face with her long Big Apple red fingernails. Within a few seconds of rolling around on the carpet with her, I had determined that she was just as strong as I was, quite possibly a better fighter than I was, and, at least based on the weird things her eyes were doing as we rolled around on the floor and I struggled to keep her teeth away from my neck, almost certainly not a human being. I mean, the bitch was scary. Demons don't like silver. It's one of the few old standbys that work, at least a bit. Holy water, for instance, is about as much use against hell's servants as Diet Pepsi. Silver doesn't always kill them, but it almost always hurts them. Unfortunately, what with one thing and another, that week I didn't have any silver bullets on me, so when I got my hand free for a moment, I just shoved the gun against her face and fired 3 of the ordinary kind. I had my silencer on, so the .38 didn't make too much noise, but she sure as hell did. She reeled back, screeching like a power drill and clawing at the remains of her features like someone trying to get soapy water out of their eyes, then came after me again. Any normal demon in a real-world body would have gone down just from being shot in the face, but she was one of those stubbornly murderous ones. Even if you cut off her arms and legs, she'd be crawling across the floor like a snake, snapping at your ankles with her teeth. I hate the stubborn ones. As soon as she had rubbed the blood out of her remaining eye, she leaped forward and did her best to wrap her arms around me, dragging me back down to the floor. I didn't want to use my last couple of bullets, so I did my best to beat her unconscious with the butt of my Smith & Wesson, but all I managed to do was push her jaw unnaturally far to the side of her face, which made her look like an extremely disturbing Popeye cosplay girl, but didn't slow her down at all. She was on top of me again, slapping and slashing with her nails at my eyes, so that all I could do was cover up. Meanwhile, she was also doing her best to drive her knee up through my groin and into my chest, introducing my balls to my heart, a meeting that should never take place. This gal was serious bad news, and any moment now the guards were going to come busting in, and it would be all over for your new friend, Bobby Dollar. It wasn't the first time I ever found myself with a howling, angry she-creature on top of me, and God knows it probably wasn't going to be the last either. But as the crooked, fanged mouth of Kenneth Vald's secretary snapped at my face, showering me with bloody froth, I couldn't help reflecting on how I had yet again wound up in such an extremely unpleasant situation. And, as usual, it had been my own stupid fault. Chapter 1. An Old Testament Cinch. Let me go back to the beginning. It'll make more sense then. Not a lot of sense, but more than it probably does right now. Pretty much everybody was already in the bar the night it all started. Monica Neighbor, Big Old Sweetheart, Young Elvis, and all the rest of the whole sick choir. Oh, except that because of recent changes in the local ordinances, Cool Filter was stuck downstairs smoking out on the sidewalk. Yes, some of us angels smoke. I used to do it, but I don't anymore. Our bodies are loners, after all, and it's not like we're too worried about dying. Anyway, it was a pretty normal late February night in the Compasses, until my friend Sam came in, towing an overcoat full of new meat. "Fuck the poor and all their excuses," he shouted to the room. "Somebody get me a drink." He dragged over this young guy I've never seen before and shoved him into a chair beside me. "Here's someone you need to know, kid," he said. "Meet Bobby Dollar, king of the assholes." Sam dropped into a seat on the other side of him. The youngster was trapped, but he wasn't panicking yet. He grinned at me like he was glad to see me. Big, stupid, slightly sickly grin. The rest of him was thin, white, and kind of bookish, with a haircut that on anyone but an angel would have screamed, "Mom did this!" A beginner, with lots of theories, I guessed, but if he was hanging out with my pal Sam, he'd be getting some rude lessons in practical theology. "Who's your little chum, Sammy?" I knew the kid was one of us. We can recognize each other, but he sure looked uncomfortable wearing a body. Amateur or visiting pro? Junior immediately put on what I think of as the intelligent dog look. "I don't know what you're saying, but I'm sure as hell trying to seem like I do." It didn't impress me a whole lot more than his nervous smile. "Go ahead, guess." Sam craned around. "Hey, Slowpoke Rodriguez," he yelled at Chico, the bartender. "How come you'll gobble my knob for free, but you won't pour me a drink for money?" "Shut up, Riley, you're boring me," Chico said, but he dropped his bar rag and turned to the glasses cabinet. "Sammy boy, you're even more charming than usual," I observed. "So who's this? I'm guessing trainee?" "Course he fucking is, B. Can't you just smell the house on him?" That's how Sam talks about what most people refer to as heaven, up at the house, as in the rest of us work on the plantation. "Really?" Monica Neighbor stood up in the next booth so gracefully you probably wouldn't guess she'd been drinking tequila slams since sundown. "Did you hear that, folks? We've got a rookie." "Oh, yeah?" That from young Elvis. He'd been the designated new guy for 2 years now, and he was obviously thrilled. "Kick his newbie ass." "Shut your talk hole," said Walter Sanders without looking up from his glass. "Just because you were a stupid rookie doesn't mean they all are." Sam's new kid squirmed in the chair beside me. "I'm not really a total rookie." "Yeah?" Sanders looked up this time. He's kind of an intense guy, and he stared at the kid like he was going to dissect him. "Where did you guardian? How long?" Guardian? But I didn't..." The kid blinked. "I was in the records halls." "Records?" Sanders scowled like he'd drunk curdled milk. "You were a file clerk? And now you're an advocate. Congratulations, that's quite a jump." Right on cue, Chico banged the register closed. It went ting. "Look, Daddy," said Sam in a squeaky little child voice. "Teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings." "Don't be mean," Monica said. "It's not the kid's fault." Junior looked grateful for her support, but there were things he didn't know. With Monica, you live by her logic, but you die by her logic too. Women, even female angels, can be colder than men in some really scary ways. The uproar died away after a bit, and most of the drinkers went back to their private conversations or solitary musings. Sam went off to pick up his drink order. I looked at the new kid, who was no longer grinning like everything was great. "So how did you wind up here?" I asked. "Who pulled strings for you?" I don't understand. What do you mean?" "Look, you know what we do, right?" "Advocates? Sure." He nodded vigorously. "I'm really looking forward to..." "Shut up and try to follow me. How did you get jumped into a position that takes most of us years to get into?" "Headlights, comma, deer in." I don't know. They just told me." "Uh-huh. So who's watching out for your career? Somebody must be. Think hard." "I don't know what you're talking about." Sam returned with his drinks, a shot glass full of bitters, liberally dosed with Tabasco, and a root beer to chase it. Sam's been sober for a few years now. Doesn't keep him out of the compasses. "Is he crying yet, B?" "No, but I'm working on it." "How did you pick up this wet sock, Sammy?" "I was just up at the house. They dropped him on me." His pocket started to buzz. "Shit, a client already?" He scowled at his phone, then downed the bitters and sucked in air like someone had poured kerosene on his crotch. "Want to tag along?" he asked me. "A favor to me. You can explain things to little Clarence, the trainee angel here." "Clarence?" I drew back. He's not really called that, is he? That's not my name. For the first time, the youngster was showing a little back the fuck up in his own defense. I liked him better, but that still didn't make for a whole lot. Yeah, but I don't remember the name they told me, so I'm calling you Clarence, Sam declared, finishing off his root beer and then wiping his mouth hard with the back of his hand, just like in the old days, before he drank his previous body to death. Let's go. Stop that. My name isn't Clarence. It's Hara Heliel. The new kid was being very brave, a regular little soldier. My working name is Harrison Eli. Okay, Clarence it is then, I said. Sam, my chariot or yours? I'm kind of parked halfway onto the sidewalk and no one's noticed it yet, so I guess we should take mine. Excuse me. It wasn't easy getting Sam's boring company-issue sedan off the sidewalk. Some truck had come along and parked to unload, and by the time we squeezed out, we had left more than a little of Sam's paint on the truck's bumper. If it had been my ride, I would have been screaming, but Sam doesn't care about cars. Where is it? I asked him as we turned onto Main, one of downtown Jude's busiest streets. Meeting place of commerce, inept street performance, and world-class panhandling. The kid was struggling to pull the long, unused seatbelt out from between the back seats. Most of the well-known skyline was behind us, but the sparkling towers of the shores stood a short distance to the north, and the weird silhouettes of the harbor cranes loomed before us, lit from below, angular as a fleet of alien landing craft. The water, Sam said. Pier 16 to be exact. Floater? Floater, sorta. Only hit the water a few minutes ago. Probably just crossed over. Anyone I know? Some old broad named Martino? Ring any bells? As I shook my head, the kid piped up from the back seat. That's a terrible way to talk about a unique human soul. Angels, I reminded myself. We're angels, and angels are patient. The port of San Judas covers about 10 square miles along the southwestern shore of San Francisco Bay. The car was in the water at the public end, a broken wooden barrier marking where it had gone over into the empty slipway. Spotlights cut through the darkness, splashing the high port office walls and turning the bay water bright as jade. Down on the ground, the harbor police and the regular cops looked like they had arrived in a hurry. A couple of tow trucks and a fire engine were also parked along the pier at odd angles. Below them, a harbor diver had just surfaced after attaching cables to something. At his thumbs up, the winches on the tow truck started turning. The cables went rigid, the motors whined, and after a long moment, the back end of a large white vehicle broke the surface, but almost immediately one of the motors stuttered and died. The other winch strained and coughed for a few more seconds, then it gave up too. The tow truck drivers and several harbor police began to shout back and forth at each other as we climbed out of Sam's car. Why don't they pull it the rest of the way out? Clarence asked, eyes wide. That poor woman. Because it's probably too heavy, full of water, I told him. But the driver's already dead or we wouldn't have got the call, so it doesn't matter how long she sits there. Do you know about going outside? Of course, he was offended. Oh, he's a pistol, this one. Sam was already walking toward the shimmer in the air like a vertical mirage that announced a way out. The official term for them is egress, but down here we call them zippers. We make them when we need them, and we simple earthbound angels don't really know how they work, just that they do. As the kid and I fell in behind Sam, a couple of bystanders looked briefly in our direction, but then sort of lost interest. We're not easy to notice when we're working. I've learned it over the years. We're still there, if you know what I mean. We have real bodies, but if we don't want you to see us, then you probably won't, or at least you won't remember it afterward. Sam and the kid vanished into the shimmering line down the middle of the air, and I stepped through after them. As always, it was the quiet of outside that struck me first. A great heavy hush, as if we had suddenly dropped into the biggest, most silent library in the universe. But in most ways, we were still where we had begun, the docks, with the cop cars and safety vehicles burning the darkness with red and blue lights, and the downtown skyline stretching skyward behind them like a mountain range. But the police spotlights weren't moving, nor were the cops' mouths. A helicopter over the Intel Tower, a diver floating on green jelly swells, or even the few seagulls who had been startled off the pilings by all the activity and were now frozen in midair like stuffed displays hung from a museum ceiling. Only one thing was different: outside. A woman with short gray hair and a dark raincoat stood in the midst of the petrified policemen, though none of them could see her. "That's her," Sam said. "You want to walk the kid through meeting the client while I'm waiting for the guardian bee? That way he can learn from the best." "Lying bastard," I said, but I got the facts I needed from him and then led the kid down to the puddle-glazed dock. "We look the same here," the kid said, staring at his hands. I mean, we do, don't we? Like our Earth bodies?" "Pretty much." "I thought we'd look more angelic." He looked embarrassed. "Like in heaven?" "This isn't heaven. We're still on the plane of earthly existence, more or less. We just stepped out of time. But we don't have to look the same here. It's just sort of a tradition. The other side folk prefer to make themselves more intimidating. You'll see." As we approached our new client, she stared at us with an expression I had seen on a lot of faces in a lot of similar situations. Total, utter confusion. "Sylvia Martino," I said. "God loves you." "What's going on?" she asked. "Who are you?" She flapped her hands at the motionless cops and firefighters. "What's wrong with these people?" "They're alive, Mrs. Martino. I'm afraid you are not." I've dumbed down my explanations over the years. I used to think breaking it to them slowly was the kindest way, but I learned differently. "You apparently drove your car into the bay. Any reason?" She was more than a bit beyond 60, but no old lady. In fact, she looked like someone who might get old, but would never really get old, if you know what I mean. Then I remembered that she would never get any older than this moment. "Drove my car?" She looked at the white bulk of her SUV hanging at the end of the straining tow truck cables like Moby Dick, decorated with fantails of glassy, motionless water. "Oh dear, that's my car, isn't it?" Her eyes widened. She was beginning to do the math. "I was trying to turn around and I guess I got confused." She blinked. Am I really?" "I'm afraid so." Then the tears came. This is the part I hate most about my job. Sometimes your clients are so happy to be out of their sick, dying bodies that they practically dance. But those who get caught by surprise, who suddenly come to understand that there's no more, that's it, game over, well, those are tough. There's not much to say while they work it out, but if they need it, you can put your arms around them and hold them when you're outside, and that's just what I did. You would have, too. After a while, she was through the worst of it. She was a tough lady. I liked her. She pulled away from me and dried her eyes, then asked, "And who are you?" She looked at me more carefully now, as though I might be about to try some after-death marketing scam on her. "My name is Deluriel. I'm an advocate angel of the third house." I didn't bother to introduce Clarence because he would have only done something stupid like promised her that everything was going to turn out all right. I could tell by his disappointed expression that was exactly what he'd planned to do. Instead, I pointed back at Sam, who was now talking to the lady's guardian angel, or guardian, a wispy, half-transparent thing that gleamed in its folds like foxfire. "That fella is Samariel, another advocate angel. He'll speak for you." "Speak for me? How? When?" At judgment, I said. Very soon. Judgment? Eyes suddenly wide and fearful. Just wait here, please. I pulled the kid aside and gave him some fairly harsh warnings about what he was allowed to do and say, then left him with the recently departed. He and the dead woman stared at the half-submerged car as though wishing someone would leap out of it and help the conversation along. I was glad he was keeping his mouth shut. People deal faster and better, I think, with that terrible ultimate realization when you let them work it out for themselves. Besides, what are you going to tell them? Just fooling, you're not really dead. This is just a wake-up call for you to fix your life. Because it's not. It's the end, at least of their time on Earth, and no cheerful chit-chat is going to change that. The guardian angel had just finished briefing Sam when I joined the party. Briefing isn't as much like the real world as it sounds. The guardians kind of make their knowledge available to us, and for the entirety of the proceedings, it's just there, at our mental fingertips, as though the memories were our own. Thank goodness that ends again after the sentencing. It would be overwhelming to carry the details of every life you've argued for all the time. It's tough enough, sometimes just dealing with the stuff that sticks. Anyway, the guardian gave me what I guess was an interested look, although it's hard to tell with them because they're far less human in appearance than we are. A lot less corporeal, too. They don't use actual meat bodies, of course, otherwise people would be wondering why some kind of shiny human jellyfish was always floating along next to them. "You're Delorio," it said. "I've heard of you." "Can't say the same about you until I know your name." "Ephaeus." It stared at me, twinkling a little. "Heard you like to piss people off." I wouldn't go so far as to say I like it. "Look," interrupted Sam, "if the two of you want to get to know each other better, you can always arrange a romantic dinner. Right now," the guardian gave a sort of shiver, and its glow dwindled. "He's here." Something had just stepped through a red-lit portal from the other place. Their equivalent of the zipper was less like a shimmering white line and more like a fiery wound. And now he stood brushing imaginary lint from his immaculate blood-colored suit. "Grass wax," said Sam. "Shit, they're going to make me work for this one." I heard Mrs. Martino gasp when she saw the demon, and I was sorry I'd left her with the kid. It's pretty nasty when a client realizes hell is real. I hope she'd make it through the actual trial without breaking down. Some judges are real assholes about that. The quality of mercy may droppeth as a gentle rain from heaven, but sometimes you'd swear there was a drought. Another shape stepped out of the wound a few moments after Prosecutor Grasswax, a muscular, hairy demon in a cheap suit with a wolfish snout and an attitude to match. I'd seen him before, though I couldn't remember where. A nasty piece of work named Howling Fell. Bodyguards didn't usually show up for this kind of routine work on neutral turf. I wondered why Prosecutor Grasswax felt he needed protection. From the way Howling Fell sniffed the air, he looked like he was working. Didn't really make much sense. His boss was ignoring him. From a distance, Grasswax, the prosecutor, looked pretty much like a man. But as he drew closer, you could see that the shadows under his cheekbones were actually gaps in the skin, like gills, that showed the muscle working beneath. And his close-cropped hair was something more like bristles, or even scales. Also, nobody would have mistaken those serpentine eyes for human. Like I told the kid, our opponents like to intimidate. "Good evening, gentlemen," said Grasswax, showing his extremely long, extremely even teeth. "Who is against me? Delorio?" The smile twisted up just a little at one corner. "That will be a treat." "It's me," Sam said. "Ah, Samariel." He nodded. "Haven't seen you since Thanksgiving. That was you, wasn't it? The man with the knife?" "Electric carving knife," Sam explained to me and the kid, who had wandered over to see his first real demons, or at least that's what his wide-eyed stare suggested. Man did his whole family. Very thorough. Grasswax rubbed his hands together. Shall we get on with it? Have you been advised yet? I asked. Oh, quite. The prosecutor reached into his pocket and pulled out something the size of a fat little spider, but much less attractive, which he dangled in the air by one scaly leg, Hell's version of a guardian angel. Mrs. Martino's account executive has filled me in on all the particulars. I pulled Clarence to one side while Sam and the prosecutor called for a judge so I could review the rules of engagement for him, mostly to make sure he didn't do anything stupid. Okay, stand over here and listen close. This is for this lady's soul, and that's our most important job. You understand? If you do anything to compromise that, I'm going to tear your halo off and beat you bloody with it. Got it? Clarence nodded, still wide-eyed. Because this is hell we're up against, and they're going to lie and cheat and stretch every truth to the screaming point. That's why we have procedures. We can't afford to get angry because then we don't do a good job. Got it? Another nod and a hint of impatience. I hate rookies. But most importantly, kid, never trust the opposition. Trust them? Are you kidding? It's not always this obvious. Just remember what Uncle Bobby tells you, and you'll be fine. Because Uncle B had already made all those rookie mistakes and had been lucky to survive some painful lessons. When a demon opens his mouth, he's lying. Period. Assume anything else, and your final paycheck will have to be printed on asbestos because you'll be somewhere very hot. Then Zathanatron, the judge, appeared like silent lightning. It's a bit intense the first time you see a principality manifest, which is one reason I had moved the kid out of the way. My ears rang for a week after I met my first judge up close, not to mention those floating spots of light. The important angels are bright, overwhelming, beautiful, but with a lot of scary in it. Enough to give even the most devout second thoughts about wanting to see the highest someday. You couldn't really make out a face in that fierce glare, or even much of a shape, as if someone had constructed a Christmas tree angel out of burning magnesium wire. But I knew it was Zathanatron because, well, I just knew. When you're in their presence, you perceive whatever the principalities want you to perceive about them, and nothing more. From my own experience, I knew Zathanatron was severe in an old-school kind of way, but rigorously fair. Sam wouldn't get cheated, but he wasn't going to get any surprise breaks either. I put myself between Clarence and Howling Fell. The kid looked as if he was going to wet himself if he had to stand next to the demon. Mrs. Martino joined us, eyes dry now and face solemn, making an audience of 4 for the proceedings, but I could tell she was fighting hard for composure. I couldn't help admiring her again. I hoped we could help her. How come there's so many of you holy rollers here? Howling Fell snarled in my ear. That ain't right. We heard a rumor you were going to sing Ave Maria. A rumor I was going to eat your face, you mean? Usually hell has the best writers, but not always, obviously. What's going to happen now? Our rookie whispered in my other ear. What do you think? Prosecutor Grasswax is going to try to convince the judge that Mrs. Martino here should go straight to hell, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Our boy Sam is going to argue that she should be gathered unto the bosom of the highest instead. I glanced toward the frightened, quiet soul in question. That's how it works. Didn't they give you any prep at all? I didn't get much warning. Clarence stared with a kind of sickened fascination secret Christians must have felt, watching their exposed fellows being gobbled by Roman lions. They just sent me. Sent him to fill what was supposedly heaven's most important job, protecting human souls from the opposition without much of any training. Odd, you say? No kidding. I filed this bit of weirdness away for later. Grasswax was already in full swing, pacing along the dock before the coruscating judge like a goblin dancing in front of a fireplace, jabbing his long, pointy fingers as he described in lurid detail what seemed like every petty thought, unkind word, or social misdemeanor poor old Mrs. Martino had ever made. The prosecutor didn't seem to have much in the way of ammunition, but he did mention that she had been arrested for driving while intoxicated. Her husband left her at a party and took off somewhere, Sam said. Probably with a broad, Your Honor. Come on, that's clearly just a mistake in judgment on her part. Ah, yes, mistakes in judgment. Grasswax offered a significant glance to the nearly featureless gleam of Zathanatron. We'll talk more about such things. This could go on for hours, I said quietly to Clarence. Are you sure you want to be here? We could go get a cup of coffee. I saw him looking at Mrs. Martino. Not her, stupid. She's dead. She's not getting coffee with us. He shook his head stubbornly. I want to see. I shrugged. Suit yourself. Brief pause here. By the way, this is probably going to go a few minutes past the top of the hour, but that's to the end of the chapter, so just warning you. It did, in fact, go on for hours. You'd want it to if it was your judgment, wouldn't you? Your entire life being summed up, your eternal fate settled on the coin flip of guilty or not guilty? It seems like a pretty basic system, the kid said as he watched Sam work. Grasswax had begun to pull out his bigger ammunition, things like cruel words, religious hypocrisy, even petty theft. She'd stolen $20 from her church fundraiser once because she didn't have the cash to get home otherwise. Grasswax then added a string of petty sins going back to her childhood. Sam took each allegation as it came and made it clear with a shake of the head or a snort of disgust that he didn't think much of such small beer. My pal's always been a bit of a country lawyer, unhurried and deliberate. I honestly think it's the best approach with a prosecutor like Grasswax, who has been known to overplay his hand. Yeah, it's basic, I agreed, because the problem is pretty basic. I tugged him a couple of paces away from the deceased. Only two choices, see? You're going one way or the other. Even purgatory is a win for our side because it means you can work your way to heaven eventually. So each time somebody wins and somebody loses, and it happens thousands and thousands of times a day. The best systems are simple ones, and after all, this one worked for us, right? You, me, Sam, we all wound up on Team Heaven. And if this lady deserves to be there, she'll be there. I was lying, of course. It's nowhere near that simple, and one of the reasons is because a lot of what is commonly thought of as sinful is just being human. I don't know how things used to be, but the judges don't tend to put people away for minor infractions. They seem to be more interested in intent, although they can sometimes be sticklers for some of the classic old school stuff, killing, adultery, like that. But what they'll stick on and what they'll let slide is a gray area as big as heaven itself, and it takes years to learn how to maximize a soul's chances at judgment. But I wasn't even sure why the kid was here. I wasn't going to try to teach him everything in one night. Howlingfell had been eavesdropping on our conversation. He laughed and swiped a long red tongue along his lips, showing a lot of pointy teeth. You just watch, Dollar. Grasswax has got this bitch's number. She'll be flapping in the dark wind before you know it. The kid flinched, but he still wouldn't look at the demon. But some things are more complicated than that, aren't they, Bobby? And she really hasn't done anything wrong. That's not for you to decide, I said, holding up a hand to silence him. And to be honest, I'm not sure I'd trust the judgment of someone who's never argued a case before. I had an Eagle Scout once who was run over while helping a man in a wheelchair across a busy street. Open and shut, right? Fit him for a halo. Except it turned out, at judgment, that when he was 8 years old, he smothered his baby brother with a pillow. Nice-looking kid, youth pastor at his church. No reason we ever learn, just didn't like his little brother. It had been another weird, complicated case that didn't sum up easily, but I wasn't going to talk strategy in front of our opponents. Like I said, there's a lot of gray area, and you have to learn it the hard way. Instead, I cocked a thumb toward the recently deceased Mrs. Martino. Don't fall in love with a client, kid. In love? He looked horrified. You know what I mean. Don't make it personal. These were the most important words I knew. Words that could save your afterlife. Adultery, announced Grasswax, repeatedly and without confession. For years. Oh, shit, said Sam. Actually, he only mouthed the words, but I could read his lips. A grave, grave sin against the law of Moses, Grasswax continued, and no repentance either. In fact, she had just met the lover for drinks before her accident tonight, so she died unshriven, as we used to say. Am I wrong? Sam hastily conferred with the woman's guardian. Mitigated, Sam said. Her husband has a mistress. Oh, but surely 2 wrongs don't make a right, Master Samariel. Grasswax smiled. It looked like he had horse's teeth crammed in his mouth. Wasn't pretty. This is not the husband's judgment. As you know, she stands before a representative of God the Highest, he said, gesturing toward the burning presence of Zathanatron. She is not being judged by the kind receivers of the children's host. She sinned and kept on sinning. Only death stopped it. The prosecutor grinned even wider. The conviction was beginning to look, as my old mentor Leo used to say, like an Old Testament cinch. But I didn't. Sylvia Martino only got out the first few words before Grasswax turned on her and flicked his taloned fingers. The sound stopped coming. She struggled on for a moment before she realized that the gift of speech had been taken from her. No one asked you, whore, spat the prosecutor, then turned back to Sam with a grin. Well, advocate, any final words of summation? The new kid was twitching beside me as if something was biting him. Stop, I told him. Don't attract attention. You won't like it. But it was no use. How about thou shalt not steal? The kid shouted. Doesn't that count? Oh, shit. This time it was me saying it. Everybody turned to look at Clarence. Even Zathanatron, the principality, seemed to pause, his fires darkening just a fraction. He's not supposed to talk, barked Howling Fell, the ugly coarse hairs on his neck and shoulders bristling. He started his move. He would have been all over the rookie with talons and fangs, but I kicked him hard in the back of the knee. Then, when his leg buckled, I helped him to lie down with a swift jerk on his suit collar. The demon hit the ground hard. Outside is a real physical place. It's just outside time. Then I dropped to a crouch beside him to make sure he was all right. Oh, okay, I might have kneeled on his windpipe a little. Down, Fido, I told him quietly, crimping his neck until he stopped struggling so hard. Let the big boys handle this. Here. Suddenly, rough, clawed hands were pulling at me. I wasn't going to start a brawl in front of a heavenly judge, so I let myself be tugged back onto my feet, although by the time I had my balance, Grasswax had pulled my jacket most of the way off. How dare you, he snarled, but he didn't sound entirely convincing. I think he was playing it up for the judge. Easy, everybody, said Sam, getting into the middle. Actually, hang on. Actually, I've got like 3 pages left. Well, all right, it's going to take me till about 10 after, but I'll keep reading. So much for my idea of just stopping when I got to the time. Anyway, all right, so... Easy, everybody, said Sam, getting into the middle. He helped me get my jacket back over my shoulders, then patted me back into shape with a care that was almost fatherly. We've been through a lot, Sam and me. Just a misunderstanding, he said, glaring at the kid. Howlingfell was getting up now, too. He looked like he thought he understood everything just fine. His murderous scowl could have bubbled paint. Misunderstanding? Grasswax surveyed us all, a look of calculated outrage, twisting his unpleasant features into something even less charming. Did I misunderstand when I thought I heard an apprentice, unsworn and unnamed before this judge, interrupting an officer of prosecution? Or did it really happen? What did he mean? This from the judge, each word like a silver bell in a church tower, loud and vibrant, silencing Grasswax just as he was getting worked up to a grand oratorical flourish. Zathanatron turned his faceless gaze toward Clarence. Speak, child, I give you leave. Her husband, he stole from her. To his credit, the kid at least looked properly terrified at what he'd got himself into. He stole her youth. What rubbish! Grasswax wore the expression of a man forced to watch a long elementary school performance while standing outside in foul weather. Clarence turned to face the judge. From the day they were married, her husband only made love to her one night a month, like it was a job, without foreplay, without kissing. Rolled off and went to watch television. The youngster was scarlet, embarrassed. Then, after their fourth child, he just stopped. Told her she'd let herself go, that she sickened him. He looked over to the deceased, but Sylvia Martino seemed lost in a memory, or even a dream, her eyes unfocused. That's stealing, right? He said at last. I knew I shouldn't have let the kid talk to her. I felt like punching myself in the nuts for letting it happen. When did he get all that out of her? Even Sam looked as if it had caught him by surprise, and he'd talked to the guardian angel. When Clarence was not immediately changed into hot steam, it seemed pretty clear that the judge was going to allow his evidence. Sam knew better than to look this gift horse in the mouth any longer than he needed to. He quickly added a strong theme of tragic suffering to his summation and rode that nag all the way home. I still wouldn't want to put money on which way Zathanatron was going to go, but when a column of lavender light surrounded the late Mrs. Sylvia Martino, and a look crept over Grasswax's face that suggested some paralegal in hell was going to get a horrible bollocking, I knew it was over and Sam had won. Suddenly, the deceased was gone. Grasswax took off a moment later, silent and very unpleasantly angry. Howlingfell pointed a shaking, clawed finger at me. You're dead, Dollar, he growled, but his voice was still a bit weak from my knee, crushing his trachea. A moment later, he followed Grasswax through the shimmering wound, and then, except for the judge, it was just angels standing around in the frozen moment. Congrats, I told Clarence. You've made your first batch of enemies today. What? And not just on the other team, Sam said. If you ever do that to me again, kid, they'll never find all the different pieces. Pieces? Of you! He shook his head in disgust. You get any more bright ideas, try 'em out on me or Bobby first. I was watching Zathanatron, who, to my discomfort, seemed to be staring in my direction. I'd kind of hoped that scuffle with Howlingfell would have been beneath the High Angel's notice. You are wanted in the celestial city, Angel Deloriel, the pillar of light told me. Sam and the kid didn't hear it, but for me it came loud enough to make my cheekbones ache. Your archangel wishes to speak with you. Then the big glow was gone. Come on, Sam said to me. Time to go back. I'm going to buy Clarence an ice cream. I mean, we did win the case. Me, I was feeling thirsty. That's just how I react to happy endings. But then I react to unhappy ones pretty much the same way. And that's where we're stopping Coming up tomorrow, or later today rather, is Chapter 2, My Lucky Week. But we will talk about that when the time comes. So, I thank you as always for joining me and for being here to start a new book with me. And until I see you again, whether virtually or otherwise, I ask you, please take good care of yourselves, take good care of your loved ones, family, friends. Keep an eye out for those around you who may need an occasional kind word or even just a friendly smile. And we will all make it through together. So until I see you, peace and be well, and I'll see you very soon. Ciao.